numbskull. I'm broadcasting.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim, the teacher, and with us today we have A.J. Hayes, the commentator of Common Sense. He is right over there. He is the man, the myth, the legend. We have, once again, we're bringing you a live show, bringing some common sense to a bunch of common nonsense that's floating around out there. You'll see, and you'll have the opportunity tonight to get a real good flavor of the next of what's been going on, the methods that are being used to cover it up, and also a great way to see in plain sight. AJ, you want to take it away?
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, thanks for tuning in to the Cycle of Mayhem. And what we try to do every week is remove the smoke and mirrors, lift up the curtain, and try and give you a insight and guide you in the right direction on things that are going on in plain sight, right in front of your eyes. As we always say, for you to make decisions on what to believe, who's lying, what's the next smoke and mirrors issue of the week or the day, where a lot of people become frustrated and confused. That's our mission here. We lay it out there to you for you to decide. Try to be biased, try to be fair, give different points of view. Sometimes it's a little rough to do that, but we try to do our best. And tonight's topic of the show, the blah election that could and possibly will make you miserable and most likely empty your wallets. And we're going to touch on that tonight. We've been talking little bits about it, and now we're a couple days away from showtime. So this is something you definitely want to stay tuned in to watch, as we're going to bring some stuff to you, some materials and things, and kind of reflect on what's going on. But I want to start out the show tonight a little bit, and I know we've talked about similar things like this, but it just needs to be said, is a few years back when North Korea, really started popping up on the surface with their rockets and their arsenal and their craziness and madness going on over there. They started to run a few documentaries and did a little reading. And for those of you who don't know, some might be familiar with it. Obviously, it's not a nice place to live over there. It's, people are starving. It's just a mess. But one of the things they had there is these big speakers throughout the country, just big speaker. And whether it's daily or weekly, but basically what happens is they spew the news and information over these speakers, and that's the only thing those people get to hear. Everything is total censor over there. Jim, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have the internet, or at least the people don't have internet. Yeah. They don't have regular TV channels. They don't have anything. So they're really at the mercy of the government to whatever comes through that speaker. That's what they take as the Holy Grail, or that's what they take as what's going on. So seeing that, you have to pause for a second. As we always say, feel free to look it up. It's horrible because these people are really left in the dark. And one couldn't think, and I know I thought that, like, man, can you imagine what it would be like to live there? And those people don't know any better because the only conduit of information is what their communist government spews over that speaker. And who would ever think, a few years later, and it was in a gradual, progression, that if you really look hard in plain sight, the same thing's going on here and has been going on here for the last 4 years. The only difference is there's more channels. Yeah. But it's one-sided, and they just keep beating the issue after issue after issue. And it's, I had someone say to me the other day, a very apolitical person, that everything they watch anymore, whether it's a sports, whether it's a movie or a regular daily show, everything has some type of hidden, primarily leftist, woke, political hints to it, in addition to the tilted news.
If I could throw in on that, AJ, but there's also, there's another side of that. It's not just the conversations or the topics they're bringing up. It's also the topics they're not bringing up. there was a protest right through, I think, right down the FDR in New York City by the cops and the firefighters who were protesting and a whole bunch of others mandatory the vaccine mandate that was going on for it's a big deal. Well, who covered it? It never made national news. This is the largest city in the entire country, right? And the state that has mandatory vaccines, and it's completely ignored protest. It's a political protest. Every protest in every political that's what news organizations do. They cover political protest. The 99%, the occupying the Wall Street area. The all the different the people breaking down the Interior Department's doors last 2 weeks ago trying to get in there. They covered that. They all these political protests. The Black Lives Matter protest over the last summer. All of that is covered, but they ignore the vaccine mandate protest over in New York City, the largest, most populous, state that's that they had this big rally. I mean, it was big, ignored. So yeah, you're right, but there's also this stuff they're not talking about
Yeah,
on
and
purpose.
it's really they're showing I believe, and again we don't get any, we're not promoting any specific show, we don't make a dime doing this.
Right.
I believe it's on FX. There's a weekly series they're running called Impeached or something along that lines, and it's basically the story of when Bill Clinton couldn't keep his shorts up and was basically grinded up on any woman that would sit still long enough for him.
Playing with cigars and doing other things with that.
Well, I mean, yeah, just a pig,
Yeah.
a just disgusting filth bucket. And you know what? There's Republicans too that are filth buckets. So I always like to say on this show. But anyway,
True.
This documentary slash reenactment of what happened when they had him and the thing he married in the chair. They actually really highlight, and that's not the point I'm trying to make, but they highlight just how vicious those people are. In fact, his wife was, the only thing missing was the fangs. But what I was getting at, the point I'm trying to make, when they were interviewed, and you guys could pull that up again and, to reflect your memory, the journalist, and I don't recall who did it, but believe me, man, they were drilling him. Absolutely drilling him. No softballs. He tried to pivot from the conversation, and the journalist asked all the questions. And it kind of made me pause for a minute and think, where the hell did that go? Whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether it's president, Congress, Senate, those high-level positions, they actually at one point in time did ask hard questions. And he was trying to make a play, if you guys recall. I didn't have sexual affairs with that woman. And he was trying to articulate like his version of sex and downplay, the dress, and that we're not going to get graphic on here. We're not the public school system. So, it was just something to see. And it's like, what happened to that? And if you think about this, we try week after week, the last couple of weeks, we were asking, what has the Biden administration done right? And we thought we did find the one thing that he did right, and that's just repeating 50 years of his bullshit stories. And they were all debunked, but he's just said them so many times repetitively over the years, he can get that right. But if you ask him something about foreign policy, or you ask him about a crisis going on, drugs coming over the border, murder in the streets in the inner city, he can't carry on a sentence. We know that part. But what happened to that journalism? And we have a countdown up there in the corner, the Afghan hostage crisis. There's also a countdown to when did he actually sit one-on-one with the reporter and answer real questions. Folks, whether you're Republican, Independent, Democrat, you have to ask yourself, and you can't play stupid to this, even the Democrats are not happy and see what's going on here. They hit him in the basement through the election. They protected him. They coddled him. And here it is. I believe, and check me on this, we always like to be accurate, but it's over 100 and some days. And I don't believe in his entire presidency he actually sat down with a reporter to actually answer the hard questions.
And to be
some
clear,
of the
George,
interviews he did were scripted.
Yeah, George. There's a lot like George Stephanopoulos. That's a scripted. That's not a real interview. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about sitting down with a real, first of all, real journalist. Stephanopoulos isn't. He's a Democrat hack. He's a well-known operative for the Democratic Party.
Not to interrupt you, but
like
he played a big role in the documentary on the Clinton impeachment. Just saying.
yeah, well, that's fine. But but I'll put it this way, Brett Baer, someone like that, he's an honest journalist, straightforward, straight shooter. We're not talking about it has to be someone conservative. We're just talking about real reporters who actually do their job, not their ideology. So I mean, I get what you're saying. You're 100% right. They don't want to put him in front of anybody like that. The Cheryl Atkinson, she's another one. She's a hardcore journalist, and you may dislike the mean tweets and the things that upset you, but one thing you can be sure is Trump sat down with the reporters. He sat down and he spoke his mind. He said what was on his mind, and you may not like what he said, but he didn't run from reporters.
The thing, and it goes back to he's not in control of himself. And, I would even go as far as, take Brett Baer, take a reputable journalist from, a left-leaning station, team up together, make it a national event, and they take turns. Never going to happen. But folks, really? Like, you have to look at this. And if you were on the fence about, no, it can't possibly be that bad, Fox News is exaggerating this, or this news media is exaggerating, go out there and find it and send it to us. When he sat down and had a real interview where real questions were asked of him. What they did, and it was go ahead.
I think he spent I think somebody did a number on his number of days in Washington. The hard part with what you're asking them to do is he would actually have to be in Washington for that to happen. And I think almost 50% of the time that since January 20th, he's actually been outside of Washington, D.C. and in his Delaware mansion with the wall that's being built around it to, there's his shore house so he can be safe from interlopers while our border's wide open without a wall. But sorry, go ahead, continue.
No. The whole point I'm trying to make is if you're on the fence, to be fair, if you're on the fence about, it's being exaggerated, look for yourself. We encourage you to do that all the time, but it is in plain sight. And what did they do? We articulated in the past couple shows about the propaganda bombs being dropped as the election day gets closer. Mm-hmm. And one of the big propaganda bombs that was dropped is just like we're talking about right now, 100 and some days or more. And I don't think in his entire presidency he's ever exposed himself. Oh, I'm sorry, his handlers behind the curtain ever exposed him, because they can't, to real questions. So as an American citizen, regardless of your party affiliation, have you ever anything like this? And there should be a lot right there to tell you may need to rethink about what's going on, because if you have children, if you have grandchildren, or even your own wallet, your own finances, we don't have enough time in this show tonight to go over all the things that are in play here. But this is really dangerous stuff. And the fact that the man holding the chair, or as you say, the man sleeping in the White House, right there should be enough to tell you something's wrong. And if it was a Republican doing the same thing, you would hear me saying the same thing about them, is what are you hiding? We pretty much know why they're hiding him. Why aren't you answering any questions? Why aren't you allowing him to get out? And then they knew that this was becoming an issue. So, here comes another propaganda bomb. And the people behind the curtain come up with this thing, we need a town hall. Yeah, that's what we need, a town hall. And you basically had his nanny Anderson Cooper there. I encourage you to watch in its entirety the town hall he did on CNN, where he forgot things, forgot where he was, and Anderson Cooper is his handler. He's an operative. One can't think otherwise, because when do you know a journalist to have to tell? I don't even know if you can call him the most powerful man in the world right now, but a person of that stature with that much power has to remind a journalist has to remind the president of the United States of his thoughts. It was right there in plain sight. So, we could sit there and go over different little, issues on what's been screwed up. You know all about that stuff, I'm sure by now. But that just sums it all up. When the man starts asking what you're not going to see, we'll go on the record right here on the Cycle of Mayhem. You're never going to see him answer questions from a legitimate reporter. Not going to happen.
If I can throw in something that you brought up before, where he brings up these stories, these fake, folksy stories that are, something his father told him, or something that happened to him years ago. These stories are part of him. They're part of his mythology, and it is a mythology. And so he uses those to burn through the time on the questions. And I'll remind you that it took an hour and 10 minutes for them to get to somebody who was a Republican, a so-called Republican, to ask a question. And they were light softball Republican questions. Meanwhile, every question prior to that was from an independent / leaning left or a straight up Democrat. So he didn't get, even from the crowd audience questions, there was no real questions. It was all scripted, as you pointed out. And he again burns through and tries to make it seem like he's there and he's a part of it, because he brings up these stories, but he's really not getting to the point of the question. He's dodging the question, and by doing so, making it look like he's on top of his game. But that's just a politician's trope. That's what they do. They're good at it. That's why they're politicians. And this guy's been doing it for 50 years. So for him to be able to BS his way through a question, it's like me eating an ice cream. I'm going to do it no problem. I can eat ice cream all day and love it. This guy can lie through his teeth with his BS stories and be fine with it and not make it look bad at all. Yeah. That's exactly to your point, I believe.
Well, the thing is, he's beyond comprehension to even be able to lie good. He could repeat those folk stories over and over again because he's done them for so long. But outside that, if you were to ask him, what color tie he was wearing, he probably couldn't answer that.
Yeah, no, it's like Hillary and getting off the plane under fire, right? That story, how she still lies about that. There's video of her getting off the plane, taking a wreath and doing not one bullet being flying through the air. Yet she still tells the lie that she landed it in the Balkans under fire. Give me a break.
It was kind of like when she was, when there was the video where when she was trying to run for president, and she had a meltdown when the polling wasn't coming out her way too well, and you just see her feet dragging on the ground. The Secret Service had to throw her in the back of the car. Exactly. Her legs just buckled out, and we don't wish anything on anybody, but it just shows the entitlement that some of these people have. Their egos are just vicious, and unfortunately it's blue collar America. It doesn't matter whether we said this a lot, whether you're we got Connor Carpenter, love this, glad to see some others think he's a fool. Very sad, alerting, share. Well, you know what, Connor? Thanks for tuning in. And we always ask, you got to share, you got to spread the word, to your neighbors and everybody, the things that we're putting out there, spread it around, But we like the reason we hit on this interview, or him not taking any real interviews like a normal president. Look, Trump was over it. He made himself available every day because he had nothing to hide. And if he did, he didn't dodge any questions, that's for sure. With this guy, and we're going to put this out there. I think, Jim, we ought to do this. is anyone watching the show, whether you're watching it live with us or you're watching in a couple days, feel free to post up. Who do you think is really behind the curtain? Who is the great and powerful, I'll give you a little hint, Oz's, plural, behind the curtain? Post your names. We're curious to see, because if you're following along, we'll see if you hit the home run on who's actually behind. You might get one, but the question is, do you get the other one? So, moving on with the show, in reference to that, Democrats, and I'm hearing a lot of it, man, a lot of Democrats are embarrassed on what's going on. And they're humble, patriotic Democrats that realize that they got sold a bill of goods, their party has failed them, and they're not happy with what's going on, and they're embarrassed because they're impacted the same as a Republican, the same as an independent, the same as any other blue-collar taxpayer. Now, you'll have the hard leftists that are just cloud nine, don't have a clue, that will, in the face, they will admit, or they will stand by their man, basically, and deny. And now they have fellow Democrats looking at them laughing, going like, what you talking about? And they're just such a small minority now, and they're in trouble. And again, if this was a Republican, it would be the same thing. A couple of weeks ago, you heard me hammer Republican leadership for not intervening. It's so bad. It's time to intervene. Not on TV and in the news media.
You got a response, AJ.
You're
Soros
close.
and Obama.
Well, one's fun to get, and you got the other one. Still another one out there, though. One's the bank, Troy. So, and thank you for the response, and thank you for tuning in with us. So, yeah, but what's happening too is the worst nightmare is happening. Is we got Connor on? I spread the word as much as possible. It depends what says true. There's still too many brainwash, and we're going to. You make a great point there. And I've said this to a group of conservatives one time. I said, how many people in the room watch MSNBC or CNN? And of course, as you wouldn't be surprised, not one hand came up. And I said, see, that's part of the problem. As much as it might turn your stomach, watch and see what's being peddled on the other left-leaning news networks. And I would encourage people, and Democrats are starting to tune in. And you know what? You have some that lean right, you have some that lean left. At that point, take what they both have to say and then use your common sense. That's what we try to do here on the show, is you really don't need a reporter to tell you what's going on. It's right there in plain sight. And not that most of you probably do know what's going on, but like Connor touched on, there is a lot of people who still are in the clouds. But Connor, one thing happens. When you hit people in the pocket, when they went to the pumps and gas went from $1.80 to $4, and in some cases $7, it didn't say, hey, Democrat, this is your price, Republican, it's your price. When they go to the grocery store and they have a budget and $50 doesn't get them, nowhere near what they used to get them, and it's continuing to rise. There's no relief in plain sight, for that. It doesn't discriminate. The disasters that he's doing, which brings me to my next point, is how long do the people behind the curtain and the handlers who concocted this whole mess think they can actually get away with it? You might get away with it for a little while, but those patriotic Americans who are open to split their vote or vote for someone, kind of up the middle, is going to really actually represent you, eventually it's going to be exposed. So I'm curious to see what their plan B is, because we said this before on the show, and I'm going to use the term and see if you guys remember. Oh, that's Joe just being Joe. And it's amazing because a lot of people I say that to, their eyes open, and it triggers their memory that when charismatic Barack Obama was the president, he'd always try to have that little swagger to him, and everything was like a performance when he talked. And then Biden was behind the scenes saying something stupid, and then Obama would have to do damage control for him. And I'm still believing that at that point in time, back when he was VP, screws were starting to come unloose. But again, it was the handlers that realized, put him on the ballot, put Kamala on the ballot, it would give us the best odds of winning the election. Too many people are desensitized by what they see on TV, especially people in my generation that don't know any better are voting all the wrong reasons. That's why looking at the facts is obviously very important. Absolutely, Connor. And you look kind of young there in the picture, and it's good to see younger folks paying attention because we, in a lot of areas, sometimes college kids are influenced by the propaganda and stuff that goes on in the schools. There was just a school where a kid was smart enough, and this was a high school, smart enough to take a picture where on the $10,000 TV set that's inside there that the teachers use to teach kids on, the teacher had on there, "I love Joe Biden." And the kid took a picture of it and spread it around. Now, if that was the reverse, there were schools that had pictures of the president up, and it was just a tradition for the school that they would have a picture of the active president up on the wall all the time. And some refused to put President Trump's picture up when he was president, let alone putting that stuff in a high school on something, that $10,000 video screen that the taxpayers paid for. So, we know all about that they're being pushed into this stuff at a young age, but the fact that you're young and you're paying attention, keep doing it. And we always tell you at the end of the show, don't get into an argument with somebody. Don't do it, because it's just not, if they're willing to listen, then there would be a point where more people are going to listen to what you have to say because they're scared, they're impacted, their funds are starting to run low. They have kids and grandkids and they're wondering what's over the horizon. David Gibson, Biden's master puppeteer is Obama. We established that. That's why he's investigated for spying on all the Trump. And absolutely, there's another person behind the curtain with him. We'll see if you guys can figure it out. That we believe is the other person behind there. But as far as any type of actually carrying out any investigations, you're not going to get it under this DOJ because they're too busy wasting the already stretched resources of the federal government law enforcement to police the domestic terrorists going to school board meetings trying to find out what their kids are being taught. While fentanyl by the tons is being brought over the border, criminals are running, and more importantly right now, these federal resources, instead of being politicized as a Gestapo going out there and make parents in a meeting afraid to ask a question about what their kids being taught, what about all these unsolved murders that are in the inner cities, which are predominantly Democrat controlled? Which is another question. Someone asked me the other day, can you name one area that's full Democrat control that's safe? Maybe there is, Jim. I would be curious to find the answer to that.
I don't really think the only Democrat controlled areas that would be completely safe would be those inside the governor's mansions of these areas, the city mayor's offices like Gracie Mansion. Those would be the only places where you would find complete security in a Democratic area for obvious reasons. I just want to also say that I do know, I believe Connor is somebody that I do know, former student of mine, a good young man.
Oh, good for you, Connor.
Very solid. We have another message from David as well, and they said that Joe being Joe when he filled up all those children and women, of course, meaning those times when he would put his hands on those little kids and lean into them and sniff away. Reference to that.
He does say it. He has said it on national television about being a lifeguard, and he liked when little kids would touch the hair on his legs.
Yep.
You can't make that. You can't make that shit up. But the thing is, now any of this perversion, whatever he might have rubbed his little what on, or whatever he did with that, I think he'd be the only person probably that actually would be legitimate to get an insanity plea.
Yeah, probably. I would say this. He's demonstrated all these these foils that he's messed up with his thoughts and the things that he said. There's normal stumbling with your words. He's beyond normal stumbling. He's not actually coming up with good ways to answer questions. It's pre-programming, and if it's not programmed into him already, or not coming through the mic in his ear, he can't handle it. So we have a guy who is really not in control of the situation.
No, and
So
when he did the town hall, and I don't want to waste too much more time on him, but when he did the town hall, I couldn't help to make it a point. We do have super HD TVs now, and I did make it a point to actually look in his ears. It's a possible, David. Still not you still guys are missing that second person. I will throw you a little hint. Soccer. That would be the hint. So yeah, I looked at him, with the high def TV to see if there was an earpiece in there, and then it dawned on me they didn't need an earpiece there because they had his nanny, Anderson Cooper, there with him. Right. So that was maybe the one time. I mean, look, we don't like to spew stuff here that it's, is there suspicion that there could be an earpiece? I think if there was, he'd probably grab his ear and say, what did you say? I don't even think they could do that. I think he would blow it. Right. So you literally have to have, the applesauce, the diaper change, and, the whole 9 yards. And you know what? People might not like me saying this, but you got to keep it real. What kind of wife does he have for her to allow him or them, his handlers, and the two people behind the curtain, and there's a few others obviously down the chain, to make a mockery and use her husband as the puppet in chief? Yeah. We know what it is. I mean, we know, but think about the hypocrisy of all that. I mean, it reiterates everything we push for. We preach on the show. Power, money, and greed. Power, money, and greed is what these people are nasty. And to just do that to somebody is mind-boggling. Absolutely. Most loving husband-wife couples, they say, no way, you're not doing that to my husband. He's did his 500 years of service, if you want to call it that, in politics. Let him enjoy his life and live it. But nope, their analytics and their data showed them that this would be, the highest odds, this 1-2 combination. And now I think they're in. I don't think they assumed he would deteriorate that fast. And Adderall, I don't think they thought he would deteriorate that fast. And they realized the second choice is the second choice in line is really catastrophic statistically for them. It would be even worse.
Go Brandon.
There you go.
Brandon, Chris.
Yeah, he was a heck of a race car driver, wasn't he? He did a great job in that.
AJ, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to throw a prediction down. Right?
Let's hear it. So I think I know where you're going to go with this.
I don't know. I haven't talked to you about this. This one I've kept in my hat. This is a conspiracy theory. So feel free to ridicule this as a.
You know me in conspiracy theory. Okay.
But think about this. I just want you to think about it. I personally think that the idea of high inflation, the big gas prices, I think that that's all part of their gig. I think that's what they want. I want you to think back a year ago, 2020, middle of COVID. What did they do? They handed out money to people. They gave out money, and it was a perfectly even people that I know who I thought would say no to something like that were saying, great idea. We need to help these people out because it was a compassionate thing, right? It's a compassionate thing to have the government give people a certain amount of money. My conspiracy theory is they want this to happen not because they want to give out more money next year, but what they want to do is they're going to say, listen, the gas companies are gouging you. The toilet paper companies are gouging you with the prices of their stuff because everything's going to go through the roof with the inflation, right? You following me on this, AJ?
Mm-hmm.
What they're going to say is we're going to put price controls on those. We're not going to allow them to go a certain height. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to give Brawny, we're going to give these companies money so that they can keep the prices down. They're going to give these corporations money to keep the prices down to a certain level so that you and I aren't paying $8 for a gallon of milk, right? Instead, they'll give $6 to the company per gallon, and then we only have to pay $2. You see where I'm going with that?
So you're saying they'll subsidize it?
They're going to
Well,
subsidize it,
yeah, I
which is
do.
a form of price control.
Yeah, I mean, look, when they're turning around and they tell you we're going to give you $1,600, anybody. You're right, David. Yeah, that's why they're in a pickle right now. They don't know what to do because they can't do nothing with him. And the second in command, yes, it would be catastrophic for their numbers. But the when they handed out the $1,600, anybody with a little common sense knew from life's experiences what's the catch. And I know I stood by my guns and said it all along. They're going to give you $1,600, but down the road it's going to cost you $5,000. So if you look at the $1,600 that you got, and some got a little more, a little less, look at what you spent just at the pump. Not counting all the other things, it didn't get you nowhere. It was a way to try to buy a vote, handing out money, and it's just, there's no free money. And in this line, it sounds great, and someone touched on it earlier about the way they talk on the TV, tax the rich. Now think about that for a second. Another thing in plain sight's common sense. Do you really believe for 1 second that they're going to tax the people who are the biggest PAC donors around? So on the surface, it might sound good. Remember, when these bills are passed, you'll hear it's like 3 pages of a 1,200-page bill that, okay, Americans making under $400,000, you're going to get $1,500 or another stimulus check or whatever you want to call it. But those other pages are packed with things, and that's their game plan. They over confuse things. And I always said this about President Trump. If there's one thing, and not that he didn't have his hands full with a lot of nonsense, but one of the things he promised early on when he was campaigning is to simplify the IRS. Remember the business card to do your taxes so people would really know what was going on? And look, he had a lot of other things being lobbed at him. I get it. But that was still very attractive to all Americans. And I'd like to see that come back where they simplify it. But they just keep layers and layers and layers of nonsense. But let's dive into now the title of the show, the Blah election.
By the way, Chris Cooney threw in, he agrees with me, I think. He's saying they want less beef consumption now. Is through the roof. It's all on purpose. And I think he's on board with what I was saying with my my conspiracy theory, which you watch.
I wouldn't even call that a conspiracy theory. It's the connecting the dots like we try to do here,
Yeah.
And,
okay,
Chris bringing that up, again, we can't say it enough here on the show is our hearts and prayers go out to the soldiers. It was senseless. It should have never happened. And he's responsible for it, whether he knows what he did or not, or those 2 people behind the curtain are responsible for it. No question.
Before you take it to the next step, I just want to point something out about what I've noticed is with between the media, and this is one of those in plain sight things that you mentioned before. What we're looking at is this passing of the buck. You hear Biden saying the buck stops here. The buck doesn't stop. The only buck that stops him there is the one going in his pocket. That's the only buck that stops for Joe Biden. We have, in New Jersey, we have Murphy with 8,000 people dead in the long-term care centers. He doesn't take 1 ounce of responsibility for this. He doesn't say it's his fault. He puts it on the long-term care centers. Yeah, it's like there's no responsibility being taken by these people who are holding office. Where did that go? That is long gone. You have, the guy who's sitting in the White House sitting there saying, "Oh, it's not my fault that these people died. These Marines died when this bomb went off. It's not my fault for any of that stuff. For all the disruption and the breakdown of communication and the Afghanistan falling apart. It's not his fault." He likes to say it's passing the buck because he says I take responsibility, but if the previous administration hadn't done it, I hear the same words from Murphy when I heard the debate between him and Chitterelli last week. Chitterelli, or I'm sorry, Murphy is saying, well, the New Jersey Transit was all fouled up because of Christie and the previous administration and President Trump.
Well,
Blame,
correct me if I'm
blame,
wrong. How
blame.
many years has Murphy been in?
It's been 4 years.
Yeah, point taken. Any person watching the show who works who works, you think your boss is going to give you 4 years to get your job right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not like he just took over and it's a 2 months into it, or even a year into it, or even a year and a half into it, and he wants to. And I'm not a big fan of Christie's, but he wants to blame a previous administration. We talked about that last week. In addition to race, Second Amendment, abortion, the typical three things in the liberal playbook for their attacks, they added COVID, and Trump's fault. Remember that last episode? We touched on that. And the thing is, Jim, Biden actually might be telling the truth about that. It wasn't his fault. Could it be that he really doesn't know what the heck was going on? But the two people behind the curtain could be their fault.
Well, Millie and the other joint.
They weren't behind the curtain.
Yeah, they threw him under the bus. They did everything.
They're not going to throw the people behind the curtain under the bus.
No, you wouldn't dare do that. I mean,
Nah.
look what happened when they did it with Obama. It was the general? I can't remember his name. He said something, and they went after him for it. He spoke the truth in front of the Congress, and I cannot believe my mind is blank. If somebody,
well, there's so much going on. It's not, forgetting names and stuff. What about this gem? State launches one-time cash benefit aid for individuals ineligible for federal stimulus. That's something new. Is DD? I haven't heard that one. But anything anytime they're talking about stimulus, free money, and all that, it's another diversion bomb. It really is, because it'll get the headlines, and they know when people are at their breaking point. They know right now they're in trouble in the inner cities because people are really starting to connect the dots. The black, the brown, the Asian communities that live in the cities, the carnage that's going on there constantly, still going on every night. People not being prosecuted for stealing, the petty crimes all the way up the ladder. They know, and then they're quick. We had a show where we used the term, blinding blood with bucks, putting dollars out there to blind the bloodshed. And I think it's beyond that. Too many families have been hurt. I wouldn't be surprised in the very near future if you see conservatives who want to run and be taken seriously really start going into those inner cities where they haven't gone before, because that's one of their biggest flaws, is go in there, and those people are hurting. They want to live their life. They want their kids to be able to play on the street and have decency in their schools, and just like any other American dream. And it's pathetic in 2021 that can't happen, and it's failed leadership. Yeah. We always say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And those people in those cities are seeing this carnage, and you see the moms just bawling their eyes out on TV, where this recklessness has become the norm, and these leaders, there's nobody to blame because they've been in power for 30 years. Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Seattle. The list goes on and on and on. And they just want you to pretend that it's not happening. That's where they're, propaganda machine and controlling the media, controlling the, social media. That's where they suppress that information. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
But
I actually know to speak to your point about Republicans needing to get into the city. This is going on. We mentioned it before. I forgot to mention to you. There's a gentleman, Billy Prempe, out in Patterson, 9th District of New Jersey, 9th Congressional District of New Jersey, ran last time, lost to the Bill Pascrell, the ever detestable Bill Pascrell, who is a lifetime congressman who shouldn't be, has no concern for his constituents, only about how he can fill the pockets of his cronies. I'll say this: Billy is fighting hard in the city, getting people and saying the same exact message that you just said. You can hear almost word for word when he's talking. He's saying about how the Democrats have failed. But I'll say this: the problem is, where's the Republican support from? Now I know Republicans who support him. Don't think that that there's none. There are Republicans who support him, but I'm talking the cornerstone of the party that needs to stop saying we can't win in a city. We can't win over there.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, there was just an article, and I'm drawing a brain for it, but it was in Louisiana. It was a high school, and look, these high schools right now, it's mayhem in these schools. I mean, the nonsense that's going on, the violence in the schools, and this is within the schools. The fisticuffs and all that stuff, where dads volunteered to come in from the community. Middle-aged fathers came in, and it's working, and it's great. Keep it up. I mean, kudos to them, man. If there should ever be a GoFundMe site, it should be definitely for those guys, because they're not asking for any money. But I think it's something that's going to go national real quick. I think you're going to see different chapters of their organization popping up. But there's people being paid to do that. There's people that are supposed to be doing it. And if the culture didn't get so run down by the mismanagement and incompetence of the greed that's in power there, these gentlemen wouldn't have to do this. And they don't look at it as a burden to them, but they're the fellas that are seeing it and going, we had enough. We had enough. And somebody sincere needs to get in there with them, and it shouldn't be a grant that you apply for or anything like that. How many of those guys are giving up overtime and stuff like that to go over and serve their shift over at the school to mentor kids? That's another show. Maybe we'll do a whole show on that. But let me get into tonight's topic again. The blah election that could and probably will make you miserable, and possibly and will empty your pockets. And that's this election coming up in a couple of days, folks. If you recall, 4 years ago when everyone was hoisting the Trump trophy of victory, it was kind of nice to see Hillary's face. That was priceless. But the following year, everybody went to sleep. And in your local communities, this is where you live locally, small town, these crazy people, do you say they snuck in, or people weren't paying attention, and they maintained control of your school board? They took over a majority of your city, municipality, your council, your commissioners, whatever setup you have in your town. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And so it is critical. And we've been preaching this to you guys. Don't be asleep at the wheel, because there's not some big multi-billion-dollar campaign presidential election. To pay attention and get the hell out there and vote this election and push back. You might not win back all the seats on your school board if you have one of these loony school board setups, but you get a couple of people in there and get some balance, some pushbacks. So when you're seeing these meetings and someone's trying to pull the wool, right now they have that little meeting before the meeting behind the curtain, and we say we lift up the curtain and show you what's behind it. And they choreograph what they're going to do, and then they go out there and they do their thing. And what happened? They started running out of lies, and more parents were listening. They're domestic terrorists were asking questions about, what are you teaching my kid? Why is there deep, hardcore pornography books being handed out in the library of a middle school? And, in most states, if you look at your local laws in a state, that is a crime. That is a crime, and I don't know why the parents or some community leaders aren't going down to the DA's office and filing that complaint against them, because look, we're not lawyers here, and maybe that's a question for the Sunday night show, but if you were to read this, we won't even repeat it on the show, but you guys can look up some of the stuff. It's something a bunch of drunk guys at a bar wouldn't talk about. It's that demented. And this is being accessible to middle school kids. And it actually is not cut out to be disseminated to any kid under the age of 18. So in some areas, the solution was, oh, we're sorry, that book shouldn't have been there. we're going to put it to the high school. If you read it, it'll make you throw up in your mouth if you have any kind of conscience. No question.
A couple months ago, we did on the Sunday show at the Brotherhood of Liberty. I did a deep dive into the comprehensive sex agenda, and it is connected to an international. It's from the UN. The UN set out this comprehensive sex agenda, and you can see it's broken down by age group or by years, and the stuff that they're expecting to be covered. They even have like a little gender fluidity bear for you to look at and use, and it's being used in the California schools, Austin schools in Texas, and it's now part of many of them. It's been snuck into the agendas of a lot of the districts in the bigger cities, not so much in the rural areas, but the comprehensive sex agenda is based off of my research, and I'll be glad to post. It's actually on our. If you look on our YouTube channel, Ballistic Patriot channel, you'll be able to see the breakdown of it. It's about a 20-minute segment that goes into a lot of detail on. It shows even clips or sections from the book, from where they tell you what you're supposed to be talking about. So I encourage you to take a look at it.
And there you're talking about, the anatomy of someone. These books go beyond that, and I wasn't aware of them. Well, I mean, when you're talking about, and we're not going to go there with it, but to give you an idea, when you're talking about explicit and fine detail, a man having a sexual, full blown to the nitty gritty details with his daughter. Mm-hmm. That's not talking about gender identity. That's just straight sick son of a bitch that puts something like that in the clear. Sick. And I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, and you condone something like that, you're twisted, man. You're really sick. There's something wrong with you. Something seriously wrong. The CRT thing, it's up in the air. It's back and forth with that. I think the stronger issue is that. Putting that stuff out there. You think your kids, the only place they'd be safe is in a school. I mean, it's.
They're supposed to be. And to be honest, there are a lot of schools out there that kids are safe, and this is not in every school.
No, but you gotta. That's why parents. Checking. That's why parents showed up when this was all exposed, to find out what was going on, and they were deemed domestic terrorists. But getting back to the local elections as we finish out the show, is to just give you a little example of something that happened in a local town, a small town, and some of the people running for office, again, they don't have big budgets. They wanted to give back to small businesses, not just put it on a little campaign brochure that I support, like literally do something. So they came up with an idea that we're going to do the hospitality industry, the restaurant and bar business. Those people have been decimated. Some of them will never open their doors again. And those that are open and were able to survive have a financial hole so deep that the problem is they don't even have workers that hold the ladder to dig themselves out of the hole. So these group of people that are running for school board and some local council seats, said, hey, we're going to get our following and use their platform that they established while they were running. They're not even in office to say, hey, we're going to hit XYZ restaurant and then XYZ restaurant, all in their community, and bring people in there where maybe on a Friday night or a Saturday night they have 15 or 20 patrons at the bar. All of a sudden the door opens up and there's 30, 40 people going in there spending money and tipping those workers in there who are short-staffed waiting on 50 tables. And maybe some of the people that come in there with them, say, hey, this is a pretty cool spot. I've never been in here. And they become regulars and something really proactive. And so they announced it on a local social media page. And believe it or not, you have sick bastards. And I can't, say it any other way. A sick bastard spits out at the mouth, oh, so people are going to be driving drunk? It's mind-boggling. We could look at it this way. You got tons of fentanyl coming over the border, poisoning the shit out of it. Since when is a local restaurant bar illegal? And people, look, all money's green, whether it's coming from a Democrat or a Republican. And in these bars, they need every dime they can get. And this is to the level. And granted, it's only a small minority. It's those sick, hard left loony birds that know they're in trouble, know the face of their party is a train wreck, and this is where they're going. You can't be discouraged by that, people. You have to get out, and we're going to say it again. Your local elections, you got to take some seats back if you don't like what's going on. Jim Touch, it's not every school board, it's not every town, but those towns where you woke up and all of a sudden you're saying, what the hell's going on here? This is the election that matters. You need to show up in numbers, get your votes counted, and get your vote out there and take back your community, or at least get some people on there to start balancing and push it back. At the federal level, this thing where they say in 2 years or 2022, what if you're in a local community and this stuff is still being peddled, whether it's in the schools, these crazy ideologies, or the taxes that they're doing, reassessments where people, their taxes doubled in their home. So yeah, that $1,600 got you a hell of a lot when your taxes went up $4,000. It's critical. So please, we do this show for a reason, is to get you some information and to try and prevent these things. Please get out there and vote. Don't be discouraged. Don't oversleep. Get out there and vote. And like I said, find that local person, whether it was a little league coach or whoever it was, just to have a different voice of opinion, so you can have a constructive debate. When you have one power, full total control. I mean, you have that in the government now, at the federal government, but in your local municipality, that's a blank checkbook. It really is. And when you're dealing with small communities and they start talking millions with like an M, that's not a lot of money to a small community, where a lot of these situations should be put on a ballot, a referendum. It's very easy to do, and put on a ballot in the primary for the residents to vote. Do we want to spend $10 million on this or $5 million on that? And maybe they don't want to spend a dime. And be diplomatic about your local tax dollars. Demand it, folks. Demand it from your local leadership that they do it. Who the hell are these people to turn around? Look, the payroll and the day-to-day operations, the norm. You might want to look at some of that sometimes too. But when they start talking about these solar things and these big projects, and they want to hire these advising firms and stuff like that for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or in some cases almost $20 million for something, you need to have them demand that they put it on a referendum and put it on the ballot in the primary and vote and let the people decide. If the people say we want to spend $10 million on greener grass, and I don't mean that as in climate control, just as an expression, or gold tinted windows at the municipal building, and they say yes, then they do it. But shame on people for not voting who didn't want it. But you can't leave that power in these people's hands. You can't do it, and now's the time to get your people in. Support them. They don't have the money. They don't have the backing. They need the support.
And AJ, this is our last show before the next election. So there's Sunday's Brotherhood of Liberty that we'll have, but this next election, next Tuesday, it's not just your local. It's not just for the governors of New Jersey and Virginia. It's also all the other legislative seats that are available. I think Virginia is all the legislative seats are up, as are in New Jersey. All the legislative seats are up. There's mayor races, there's board of ed races, there's councilman races, there's all the freeholder elections, or I'm sorry, commissioner elections. This is all up for grabs. It's your country to lose. It's your country to lose. And you can lose it on the top level, but you can also very easily lose it on the local level. And once you do that, it's very hard to get back.
And they can do it. A lot of people did lose it after the 2020 or the 2016 election, because they were asleep at the wheel, and still living watching the entertainment on TV, the tweets and all that stuff. And look, I'm not throwing a jab at President Trump, but it just happens. It was such a shocking victory that everybody got caught up in the moment, and they just slithered in there. So you got to vote and slither them out. So,
and I also say this: right now we're looking at there's a even a state like Pennsylvania, I'm sorry, like New Jersey, which is a very blue state, right now, the governor's seat, the governor's election, is a competitive race.
Yeah,
It's become very competitive. So you may think, I'm going to stay home, because there's no way a Republican's going to win. There's no way my guy is going to carry the race. But here's the news flash: the races have tightened up because there's a big push against what's going on. So what's going on nationwide, and that is a reason for you to go out there and start, getting the vote done. Get
yeah,
out there and make sure you vote. Make sure you get in that line early and get that vote done. And
sure,
get your
folks.
friends. Bring a friend that you know is going to vote with along your
Knock
ideals
the
and your
knock on
lines.
doors in the neighborhood, and you'll be
Yeah,
surprised. As neighbors, it's hitting everybody financially. It's hitting everybody in the pocket, and whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, there is another thing in plain sight. If you notice, there hasn't been a squad sighting in quite some time,
yeah.
and
Talk to your
there's a,
senior friends too. Get them out there. There
yeah,
might be a senior that's stuck at home and can't get to the polls. Go ask them and say, "Hey, would you like a ride to, to go to the polls? I'll take you to the polls and help you out." This is your opportunity to have an impact. One vote isn't one vote. One vote is one of many, and
sure.
that is what you need.
And the
So
seniors,
that's how
we
you.
have to touch on that real quick because that is critical. Is the plan was indoctrinate the young, brainwash them, and try to suppress the seniors by overcomplicating the vote with these 30-question ballots. It's like taking
Yep.
an SAT in some towns. If you can help out a senior to get them to the polls, like Jim said, and make sure they have a sample ballot, and I believe in some states you can lawfully, if they give you permission, assist them if they need assistance, but you have to check with your local laws in your area.
Mm.
But get them out because they are trying to suppress the senior vote. Those people didn't
Yep.
become seniors being stupid. They may be registered one way or the other, but when they see stuff like this, they're the ones that will tip the scales back the other way. Folks,
Drive them to the
tune in
polls.
with us
Get them.
next Wednesday.
Yep.
Tune in Sunday night for the Brotherhood of Liberty, but tune in next Wednesday because I think next Wednesday we're going to have the returns on this election is really going to dictate and probably show and give a real good look into the future on where this country is going. How far broke does it have to go? Some people use the word woke. Well, it's going to be broke. And how far broke does it go before people decide that we need change and we need real change and we need to start getting some balance in there? So that's all I have, folks. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. And like I said, when we kind of got ahead of ourselves there for a second, as we say, try to talk to people, be friendly, be kind, spread the word to, as much as you can. Don't be confrontational. People are going to try and shout you down and all that. Say a prayer for them because, they're obviously not thinking right and out of touch.
Yep.
No sense arguing with them. And as always, God bless. See you next week.
Let's go, Brandon. God
Let's go,
bless everybody.
Brandon. Yeah, who would have thought?
Amen.